Hey there, it's Silver, and this is Roguematch, the Extraplanar Invasion. So this looks like a cute little casual match 3 adventure, but it's actually something that I've never seen before. Despite looking super adorable and stuff, there's actually a lot going on under the hood here, and this isn't just a simple match 3 game. In fact, it's actually a fusion of two different things. It's a match 3 RPG combined with a mystery dungeon roguelike style of RPG, which, like I said, I've never seen that combo before, so I thought it was something that I definitely had to try out. So basically, in addition to being able to use your mouse to match the gems as you would expect in a match 3 game anywhere on the screen, you also have an actual physical character that you're controlling with the WASD keys at the same time. You will go to these increasingly large floors filled with sort of randomly generated rooms that all have different things in them for you to do, from enemies to face to things you have to match to symbols on the floor you have to uncover, and all of the kind of traditional like puzzle match 3 game stuff, but combined with this turn-based sort of RPG combat idea at the same time. And the way that it works is you can simply move into an enemy's space to attack them like in a traditional sort of mystery dungeon-esque roguelike, but at the same time you can also match the gems next to them in order to damage them different amounts. And you can play as several different characters. Every character has a different sort of passive statistics and things that affect how they play, as well as some special activatable abilities, and they all have a different affinity for the different mana types. There are 6 different types available normally, and some of them generate more mana from certain matches than others, depending on what they like, but they also have an attack value, and if you match that mana adjacent to an enemy, it will deal that magic attack value to them, separate from your actual physical attack value. So you have different ways to deal with enemies depending on where they are. You'll also notice that your character has a sort of square extending around them, and this is your sort of collection radius. So you can match gems anywhere on the screen that you want, just like in a normal match 3. However, if you want to actually absorb the mana into your character to use it to fuel abilities and active items and things, you have to match within this square. Otherwise you won't collect it. This adds an interesting layer of strategy because you're going to want to reposition yourself all the time by walking around, but of course walking takes a turn, just the same as matching does. And enemies will continue to spawn every certain number of turns on the field, and you have to clear the field in order to actually beat the room. So you've got to do whatever is there. There might be ice blocks you have to break by matching next to them, or these orbs you have to match specific colors next to specific types of mana to make them disappear, and some other challenges like that, in addition to making sure there are no enemies left at the same time and pushing down any buttons that might be in the room. And you know, different rooms have different sorts of hazards and challenges to face, but eventually you are going to have to clear the screen of enemies and all the other interactive elements in order to actually progress. Now, once you actually beat a screen, all the mana will disappear and the doors will open up, allowing you to progress to the next rooms that are connected to that one. But also there are sometimes item vaults, and this is where the game gets really interesting because a lot of the hidden depth is in the way these items work. So you can come across all sorts of different artifacts that you can equip on your character, and you actually have a limited inventory space that's sort of grid based, and different items take a different number of squares in this grid to equip. You also have the same thing for spells. You can find spells that go in their own spell grid, and you can equip however many of those you can fit in that particular space. Now, generally, equipment and spells will give you some sort of passive benefit just for having them equipped. Like, they'll add a certain element of damage to your melee attack, or they will give you extra magical damage of the water element, or something specific like that. But they also will have, oftentimes, some sort of active thing that you can fuel with the mana that you match, and then use on the battlefield. Like, for instance, the wind and fire wheels, which are very useful. They take, obviously, wind and fire mana, and once you have enough of it, you can activate the wheels to do a big AoE of both wind and fire hybrid damage around you to everything in the way. That goes out a pretty good distance, so it's a really useful item to have for, like, crowd control. And this does mean that, yes, there are individual damage types for each mana type, and different enemies can have a weakness to specific damage types, as well as some of them are actually healed by others, so you have to be careful about what you match next to them. It isn't always just a case of match whatever you can next to the enemy to beat them. Oftentimes they actually have 2 or 3 that they heal from, so you've got to be careful about what you're actually positioning them next to. And of course, moving your character does also position the mana stones around them in different ways, so you may be able to actually open up new matches you couldn't use before, or indeed match your own just by moving instead of actually matching them with your mouse. Just move your character around to sort of jostle the gems in certain directions and cause matches to happen. That's also a valid strategy. So basically you're going to be going through these rooms, doing all these matching battles and stuff, and trying to get a large collection of equipment and spells to actually make yourself stronger, because the enemies and bosses do get quite a lot stronger as you go down this castle. The floors get bigger and more complicated with more hazards, and the enemies get stronger, so you want to increase your own power by getting a large collection of stuff. And the rest of the depth comes from a couple of other things. So you have these gauntlets and vambraces equipped, and each one has its own sort of special token that it can create on the field if you match enough. So if you match 4 in a row or 5 in a row, they will create different special things, which is normal for a match 3 game, but in this case you actually have control over what matches create what special tokens, like bombs or cats that zip across the screen, or arrows that match everything in a certain direction, things like that. You can actually choose before you start your adventure what each of the 4 slots that both of the gauntlets and both of the vambraces do, so you can determine a sort of build for yourself right from the start by deciding what special types of tokens you can get by matching lots of mana and trying to clear the board. This is a pretty cool feature to me, because in most match 3 games you don't really have control of what these special tokens are. They're just a set thing that happens if you match a certain number of mana or tokens in a row. So being able to actually factor that into your build and determine what specific bonuses you want is actually kind of a cool feature. And then finally, you have the element terraforming system, which surprises me a little bit in terms of like how much sort of emergent gameplay it offers, potentially, if you use it well. Basically, at any time, you can just hit the E key and you bring up this element terraforming menu, and you can spend a large sum of a specific element in order to convert the room to that element temporarily, and this causes the matches you make to actually manifest physically. So, for instance, if you terraform the room to the wind element, everything will look all green and windy, and then if you make a fire match, it will combine with that and create chain lightning and actually chain a big shocking bolt around the enemies on the screen. You can also do something like terraform the room with the fire element and then match some water elemental mana to create big clouds of steam. And the steam will actually harm any enemies that stand in it, and you, of course, so be careful. And I think it can also block like enemy ranged attacks too. So you put together all of the element terraforming stuff you can do, the various different intrinsic abilities that every character has, all the different spells and equipment that you can find, and you get a pretty surprisingly complex sort of match 3 mystery dungeon RPG kind of fusion that's actually pretty neat and is a really fun time to actually go through, because it's just so different. You know, like I said, I've never played a game like this before. This is unusual. It's taking things that I'm familiar with, both of those genres, but I've never played anything that combines them. It should also be noted that the game has a really good presentation style. Everything is super cute, all of your characters are adorable, the enemies are really cute and it kind of makes you feel bad for murdering them, and the bosses are even kind of cute as well, even though they take up most of the screen. The game has a sort of like comic panel or like manga panel storytelling style where things are told almost like the panels of a graphic novel or something like that, which is pretty cool. And you even have some menus in like the tutorial area and some other stuff that you can do at camp that is displayed like this. And the game has a pretty good sense of humor. The story is quite funny, and all the characters are also pretty funny. A lot of the dialogue has a lot of references to other video game related stuff without being too reference heavy just for the sake of it. And you've also got some little silly stuff here and there, like some Lovecraftian stuff appears and you get characters like Dog Sothoth, for instance. So yeah, the game definitely has a healthy sense of humor with how it presents its story, and that helps a lot with the sort of cutesy presentation. I mean, even the different characters that you can play are also presented like this. Like the character you'll start with is a rabbit called a Bungineer, and the dog character is a paladin called a Paladinu, and the cat is a necromancer. So you got that sort of silly fantasy tropey stuff that's sort of throughout the whole game, and it fits well, I think. It does a good job of being lighthearted and funny, while also having a pretty good amount of hidden depth in the actual gameplay itself. As for the early access part, like what's currently missing, what's currently here, well, there's actually a surprising amount here already. For instance, you can play through the entire game from start to finish. All of the floors, all the levels are actually in, and I believe all of the characters are in too, so there aren't any missing characters. Most of the stuff that's missing is just polish related, and some like balancing and stuff like that too, but a lot of what the early access needs to actually work on is polish and general effects and things. Especially I've noticed sound effects. There needs to be a lot more variety in sound effects that could be a bit higher fidelity and just more varied in general, and also the music could use a little bit of work. It's a little simple right now, and in comparison with how colorful and lovely the game's graphical style is, I feel the music isn't quite up to the standard of the rest of it, so that could definitely be improved. I'd also like to see more boss fights just in general, because that's just always a good thing in a sort of roguelite run-based kind of idea like this. It's best to have as much variety in bosses as you can. I'd like to see a little bit more of that too, but I think that's something that they're aware of and are going to be working on. And the other things they're promising to work on are entire like post-game sections for the game, which is pretty cool. So the main sort of campaign run-through won't be it. They're actually planning on adding some post-game sort of castle run related stuff, which should be cool to see when that arrives. So yeah, my current view of Roguematch is it's a very promising game that has a lot of content already, so it's a pretty safe purchase as far as early access campaigns go, just because pretty much the entire game is already here, right? You're not missing any major big chunks of content. You're pretty much buying a complete game already, so it's easy to recommend. And it's a very heady mixture of genres that I've never seen fused before, so that's always cool to see. So thank you guys very much for watching. I will put a link in the description below this video to the Steam store page so that you can go and check it out yourselves. And I'll see you guys next time.